We're very excited to bring you guys this webinar to talk about Cognos Analytics version 11.1. There's been, like I said, a lot of excitement around this. We've heard a lot of really good feedback from people who have already seen it. Last week at Analytics University, we saw this was essentially the buzz of the conference. We saw a lot of good excitement around this version that was released. So very excited to bring you guys this information and talk about some of the highlights and enhancements of this new version. By way of introduction, my name is Kevin Emanuel. I'm the Director of Software Solutions here at PMsquare. And personally, I've been in this Cognos world for just over a decade. And even personally, I think this is one of the more exciting version releases that's been introduced. So again, happy to be here and talk to you guys about this. I'm joined here with one of my colleagues and one of our senior solutions architects, Ryan Dolly. Ryan also has a very long tenure within the Cognos space and the analytics space, and he was also involved with the beta program for this new version prior to its launch. So he's very much up to speed with all of the enhancements and features that have been added to this release, and he's actually going to be the one to walk us through the live demo today and talk about those enhancements. So again, thank you guys all for joining the webinar. And with that said, we'll go ahead and get started. Just a quick housekeeping item before we get started. We do try to keep these webinars as interactive as possible. So we're going to have a couple of polls that we'll ask you guys about as we go through the presentation. And there's also a chat box to the right side of your screen under the attendee box where you can submit your questions. I highly encourage all of you to ask any questions that you may have. I do have a couple of my colleagues that are on the line. They'll help us get your questions as we go through the presentation, and we'll also keep a few minutes at the end of the webinar to address any of the questions that you may have live. So please do submit your questions, and if we don't get to them during the presentation, we'll be sure to follow up with you afterwards and answer them for you. With that said, as far as an agenda is concerned, I'm just going to spend a couple of minutes doing a quick introduction. There has been hundreds of people that have registered for this webinar, and some of you may not be familiar with who we are as a company, so I'll spend about a minute or two on that. And then from there, I'll hand things over to Ryan. He'll talk about Cognos Analytics at a very high level, and kind of talk about IBM's overall objective behind this new release before we get into the live demonstration and open things up for a Q&A forum at the end. So that's the agenda that we have for you guys today. With that said, we'll go ahead and do a quick intro. So PMsquare, for those of you who are not familiar with who we are and what we do, our entire organization is really broken up into three distinct pillars. First and foremost, we are a gold-level IBM business partner, and what that means is that we can help our customers with anything related to IBM. That can be related to software licensing, procuring software, taking care of your annual support and subscription renewals, or really just accessing anything that you need within the IBM community. We have a very good relationship through the tenure that we've had as an IBM business partner, and we have the ability to get you guys connected with anything that you may need within the IBM community. So that's kind of our forefront of our business and what we're all about. The second piece of our company is our professional services division, where we not only help our customers implement and deploy these solutions within the analytics portfolio of IBM, but we also provide any kind of ongoing support that you may need, whether that's training, whether it's to get together from time to time and have more strategic discussions about where you are and where you want to go, some road mapping conversations. So really anything throughout the entire life cycle of implementation and then bringing the tools to life, we're here to help you in that process. And on the right side, you'll see some of the accolades that we've been able to achieve over the years, both from IBM and some external sources, in addition to the IBM champions that we have here on board within our technical team. And then last but not least is our solutions team, where we've developed a series of tools to really help our customers not only maintain, but also monitor and make sure that the deployments are successful. That can come in a few different forms, making sure that your user adoption continues to grow within the platform. adding additional enhancements and helping you guys with a more efficient deployment of the tools is really what this division of our company is all about. And one of the primary things that is really most relevant to this particular topic is one of our most recent developments of our Thrive solution, which is really geared towards user adoption, really giving you the power to understand, what's happening within your Cognos environment, especially at times of upgrades. Are my users coming into the environment? When they're there, what is their experience? If they have a good experience or bad experience, what contributes to that? And how do we become more proactive in making sure that the user experience while users are within the platform is optimal? So we can talk a little bit more about this at the very end of the webinar, but just wanted to highlight that as one of the solutions that's really most relevant, and one that also was very well received last week at the conference as we demoed this to a number of customers there. So high level, this is who we are as a company and some of the main areas that we help our customers. And with that said, I'm going to hand things over to Ryan to talk to us about Cognos Analytics. Before we do that, I do want to just do a quick poll just to see how many people were at the Analytics University last week, where a lot of this information was first introduced. So with that said, if you could do us a favor and answer the poll. All right, I see still some answers coming in. Okay, so a smaller percentage of you were at the university, which is understandable. Most people that were there saw a lot of this information, so just wanted to get a pulse on that. Thank you for responding to that. So with that said, Ryan, I'm going to go ahead and make you presenter, and or actually I'll walk through this area with it, and then I'll hand things over to you afterwards. So Ryan, I'll let you kind of take this over then.
Great, thanks, Kevin. Yeah, so I'll just get started by saying how, just as a general note, how genuinely excited I am for the 11.1 release. I think, if we're being honest, there's been a little, say, trepidation amongst the Cognos user community about what was coming down the pike. It did seem that updates to the 11.0 release sort of slowed. We were getting bug fixes, but not a whole lot in the way of new features. And with 11.1, I think a lot of the concern has been answered as far as the direction of the product, and I hope to share that with you today. That this is genuinely an exciting update that is going to give you a bucket of very cool new features related to artificial intelligence and lightweight data science. But also, if you're a career Cognos person, this version is going to make a lot of kind of nuts and bolts improvement to how Cognos functions. So we'll talk through all of that, and then I'll jump into the demo. Kevin, if you can go ahead and advance the slide. So when did 11.1 come out? Well, it was announced at Analytics University 2018, which happened last week in Miami. Myself and Kevin and a number of our colleagues were down there. And if you've never been, I think this is at least the second year that Analytics University has happened, but I would strongly consider going. If you've been doing Cognos for a while and you remember the old IOD days or the Insight days, Analytics University is approaching kind of what that was. It's an IBM conference, but it's only focused on the analytics technologies. It's not kind of a general conference like IBM Think is, where yes, the analytics technologies are there, but also, and that's a lot, right? So that's my little plug for Analytics University. I'd love to see people down there next year. I think it's a great event. As far as when is 11.1 available, so it's available on cloud today. If you were to go and sign up to be a new multi-tenant cloud customer for IBM Cognos Analytics, you would get the 11.1 release. For most of us on the call, the question is probably, when is the on-prem release coming out? And we don't have an exact date for that yet. We've been told sometime in Q4. And I've heard a couple of maybe tentative dates. about when in Q4 that might be, but I don't have firm enough information to really throw anything out there. I don't want to get anyone's hopes up and then, you know, it ends up not launching until sometime in December. So sometime in Q4 is about as accurate as we can be right now for the on-prem availability of 11.1. Now, I just learned this today. The first on-prem release will probably actually be 11.1.1. So I did want to share that with everybody. There aren't anticipated to be any feature changes between what I'm showing today and the 11.1.1 release. So the difference between 11.1.0 and 11.1.1 is going to be 100% focused on stability and bug fixes. As far as, you know, kind of how I approached it, IBM chose 5 partners for the Cognos Analytics Early Access Program, and we were one of them. Now, I was not the only person at PMsquare to get access to this version. We actually, I think we had 8 or 9 of our consultants participate in the Early Access Program in some capacity or another, but I did help organize that. And overall, it was a great experience for us, and I'm sure for the other partners who were involved too. So what's new? The most important thing that's new is there's a new logo. So if you look on the screen, you should see on the left-hand side this, I've been trying to figure out exactly the best way to describe it, but this colored bars and dots in the vague shape of a C is the new Cognos logo. They had it on stickers and t-shirts down at Analytics University, and when we jump into the demo, you'll see that the logo is now in the product itself. So that's the new Cognos logo. I'll leave it to you to decide if it competes with the old red sunburst logo from back in the day, but I think it looks pretty good. So the big thing here is going to be, probably this is what's going to get the most press or marketing, is going to be all the new AI features in Cognos. I like to think of this as Watson comes to Cognos. Some of you may know that the Watson Analytics product is entering end of life. So if you've seen Watson Analytics in the past and you thought it was cool, but you know, did or did not make an investment in it, that product's going end of life, and Cognos is a successor product for Watson Analytics. So the idea is that the type of functionality that you saw in Watson Analytics will be available in Cognos as of 11.1. Now, what does that mean? It means automating data prep, making it easier to learn Cognos and interact with Cognos, but also to reduce bias. And this is something that I hope to show in the demo today, how the new feature set really does. You know, it's easy to build a visualization and say, aha, you know, I've identified the important relationship here, but the new version will allow you to dig a little more deeply than that and see, you know, what's going on in the data and uncover areas where there may be some bias in your data that you wouldn't have recognized otherwise. And it all is geared towards providing eureka moments. I was talking to one of the IBM product managers this morning, and that was really what he said. In his mind, it's all about, right, is Cognos helping you discover the most important pieces of data that can change the way you think about your business. So what does that mean as far as Watson Cognos? There are AI features now infused throughout Cognos. There is a new feature or studio, if you want to use the old school term, called Explore that we'll take a look at today. But there's also something called the AI Assistant that is embedded within dashboards and the Explore feature that is kind of an AI chatbot you can talk to that will show you things about your data. And also there's a new feature called Insights, in which any visualization you're looking at can automatically uncover statistical outliers in the data or plot average lines on there, as well as give you a predictive score for the relationship to tell you how strong is the relationship from a predictive perspective. So those are kind of the new AI features in Cognos that we'll be taking a look at today. But there's also a lot of very interesting, just like I said, nuts and bolts stuff. And I'll talk over that briefly next, and then we'll jump into the demo. So what are the bread and butter or nuts and bolts improvements? They're too big to list here. If you go to PMsquare.com, we have a pretty nice blog that goes into some detail about specific changes in each of these areas, but to summarize them, I would say dashboards are much more customizable. So if you've attempted to roll dashboards out or and have had mixed success because of problems like, hey, I can't make a custom color palette, or I can't change the way this font looks, all of those concerns are set aside in this version because you really can tailor the dashboards to look much more pixel perfect, much closer to what in the past you could only do in reporting. Data modules catch up to Framework Manager in most ways. There are still some features that are missing, and I will do my best to show all the ways in which it's caught up. But you know, again, if you looked at data modules and you said, "Oh, that's let's kid stuff," right? A lot of people I know who are seasoned Cognos pros messed around with data modules for 5 or 10 minutes and said, you know, this can't compete with Framework Manager. You will find that data modules really do have almost all the functionality that you would want as far as comparing to what was in Framework Manager. Report authoring is easier to use and navigate. It hasn't received a ton of updates, but I think the updates it got were very, very good as far as improving the usability, the user interface from the developer perspective, just making it easier to understand where you are, you know, what page am I looking at, what query am I looking at, and how do I get back to something else. I think big improvements there. And then a number of great new admin features. Probably won't get too deep into these today, but very interesting things. The ability, for example, to define you know, custom groups for mailing within the Cognos user interface. So you can create within Cognos a group of users, and then Cognos, if you were to schedule a report and tell it to burst, you know, you could have it burst to that Cognos group that you defined as an admin, rather than bursting out to or relying on something like an Active Directory group or something in your Exchange server to handle a group email distribution. So like this is an example of the type of changes that are in here. Like I said, I won't get too deep into them, but if that's what you're primarily concerned with, do reach out to us and we can schedule a call and I can show you the new administrative features. So what is our take on all of this? Well, the AI implementation in Cognos, we do, right? It's very impressive. It's done very well, and it's integrated into Cognos nicely. I hesitate to use terms like that because, you know, I'm a tech guy and not a marketing guy, but it is very impressive. The improvements to dashboards and data modules in particular, I do feel make Cognos competitive with Tableau and Power BI for self-service. So if this is an area where you've run into challenges in the past, I would really consider you to take a look at what Cognos offers now compared to desktop visualization tools and see if the Cognos' combination of new features and, you know, governance makes it a compelling offering in the self-service arena. The Cognos 11 features are also, I would say, up to par for IT use cases. So if you're an IT developer, longtime Cognos person, and you took a look at dashboards and data modules and said, and all you could see was the list of things they couldn't do, which was true for a lot of people I know, I would take another look. I do think that the Cognos 11 features, while they're marketed as self-service, do fit into an IT workflow, particularly if you're attempting to transition to a more agile or iterative way of working. I strongly encourage you to see how they could fit in to your existing IT process, or maybe how you could use them as the foundation for a more rapid form of IT delivery. So overall, my recommendation is really that customers should move to 11.1 as quickly as possible. The upgrade path is not difficult. It is not like going from, you know, 7 to 8, which of course was a nightmare, or from, you know, 8 to 10 or 10 to 11 even. The upgrade path here is more akin to going from, you know, if you were to go from 11.0.5 to 11.0.8, right, or 11.0.12. So I do encourage customers to take a look at it, look at the feature set, determine what type of impact it can have to your Cognos practice, but do put a plan in place to try to move to 11.1 as quickly as you can, because I think it's very exciting and you'll be happy with it.
All right, fantastic. Thanks, Ryan. I'm going to make you presenter here to move forward with the demo itself. Before we do that, though, I want to take one more quick poll just to get a pulse on which version of Cognos everyone's on. And we went ahead and threw an 8.x on here too, just to just to see if anyone's way behind. But I don't anticipate having too many people in that bracket. All right, so it seems like we have about 30% or so in Cognos 10, and most everyone else on Cognos 11. As Ryan mentioned, yeah, we if you want to see any of the features in more detail and start to plan for those upgrades, we're happy to set up a more detailed session for you guys. But thank you for responding to the poll. And with that said, Ryan, I'm going to go ahead and make you a presenter here.
Sure thing.
Sure. All right, we can see your screen.
Okay, great. So here's that new logo I mentioned, right? Front and center, you'll also see it up in the upper left-hand corner. Now, otherwise, what you should be looking at here is very familiar if you're on Cognos 11. They have not really changed the user interface as far as the login screen. How do I look at team content or my content? How do I search for content? All of that is the same. So for your users, your Cognos, for your users who all they're doing is logging in and viewing reports, going to 11.1 is not going to cause them to have to learn a new user interface or anything like that. And I think that was a great decision on IBM's part, even though maybe there are some suggestions I could make for how to present this info, because if you've just recently went to 11, going to 11.1, we don't want it to seem like you're installing a whole new piece of software, right? So right off the bat, user interface is going to be very similar. Now, if I click on the new button, you'll notice right away a couple things that are different here. The ability to immediately create jobs. I do think this came in one of the later 11.0 releases, but I would highlight that you can, from here, directly create jobs within Cognos. And then the new exploration interface you can get to by the new menu. So I did want to point that out because the way I'm probably going to show us getting to exploration is going to start in a dashboard, but you can just launch exploration on your own. So right off the bat, I'm going to launch a new dashboard. You'll notice there's some changes here. You're no longer going to choose tabbed or untabbed layout because you have much better tab management features within dashboards. I'll go ahead and just choose kind of the default template here and then choose OK. And now I'm into the dashboard creation tool. So some changes in how it looks, but overall, if you're familiar with this tool, you're going to find that it's mostly the same. You're not going to have to relearn a new set of buttons or anything like that, but you will have a lot more options in here. Now, in the past, when I would demo this, a lot of times what I would show is I would add a data set and then I drag and drop a couple things in here to show, hey, look, Cognos can automatically build visualizations, right? And it can still do that. But instead, I'm going to jump right into this new assistant button. So this is what the assistant icon looks like. And anytime you see this, when you click on it, you have access to the AI assistant. And the AI assistant is a place where you can, using text, type to Cognos what it is you might be looking for, and Cognos will suggest some responses for you. So for example, if I come in and I just say, show data, Cognos is going to sit down here, show data. Let me go out of full screen. I think that's my problem here. Okay. As I said, this is was just recently released, so it may be that while I was talking there, I lost my connection to the server. So let me go ahead and reload this. I appear to be having a connectivity issue. I'll try popping open a new dashboard. This URL here. Let's just try. Okay. So some kind of hiccup there. Let me go ahead and launch dashboard again. Apologize for that. Go into the AI assistant. There we go. All right, we're back on track. So I type in show data, and it's going to tell me, it lists data that I have access to. It's going to rank it in terms of when did I last access it and how useful do other people find it to be. So if I'm brand new, what it's going to put at the top is going to be the stuff that other people use the most. In this case, you can see a variety of different things, uploaded Excel files, data modules. I'm going to choose the American Time Use module here. And it responds and says, okay, let me expand this a little bit so we can see it better. But for the American Time Use module, here's a list of relevant fields. So here are fields within this data module. I can expand it to see more of them. And if I'm interested in any one of these fields, I guess it's important to say, you know, it lists information about the field, right? So for like television is a categorical field. It has outlier information, and it's a measure, right? And you can see all of this type of stuff. Employment status is categorical, not nominal status, entity, identifier. All of this is Cognos trying to just communicate to you what type of data is this, right? Now, if I want to see more information about one of them, I can click on it, or I can type, for example, you know, show housework. Now it's showing me information about the housework field itself. Does it contain null values? How many distinct values are there? What's the max and the min, right? And how many total rows have a value for housework? It's also going to suggest related fields. So Cognos is automatically analyzing uploaded data, data sets, packages, even data in your relational databases in order to determine which fields are related to one another, how closely are they related, and some of the causal drivers between fields. So if I want to see, for example, the relationship between housework and gender or weekly earnings, for example, I can click on chart housework and weekly earnings. It's going to come up with a variety of visualizations for me to look at related to that relationship, and I can insert them into the dashboard if I want. Conversely, if I want to take a look at now, it's going to show in ranked order predictive fields that are most tightly related to housework based on a predictive analysis of the data. So weekly hours worked, weekly earnings drive it, but maybe children. So maybe I'm interested in this relationship. I can click on children, and now it's going to give me a number of different visualizations that I can look at. So maybe I'm interested in this one, average amount of housework by number of children in my underlying data set. If I click and drag this into the visualization, it'll automatically build, or into the dashboard, it'll automatically build my visualization. I can see it here and start interacting with it like I would have in 11.0 dashboards, right? So I don't want to spend too much time on this feature. I do think it's very cool. And it's not just available in dashboards. It pops up in other places in Cognos as well. You really can kind of interact with it by just asking it questions, and it will not just build visualizations, which is kind of what 11.0 did. You could type in a question and it would build a visualization, but it'll actually suggest relationships to you, suggest other fields that have causal factors, that sort of thing. So with that, set aside, we have a lot of new options here for how do we want to go about building dashboards compared to what we had in 11.0. Right off the bat, I think one of the great things in here as far as building something, a presentation quality object here, is I have the ability to set preset screen sizes. So if I know people are going to be consuming different sizes of screens, I can set that, as well as the actual pixel height and width of the screen. So if you're trying to build a dashboard for monitors or of a certain size, or mobile devices with a certain pixel density, you can set all of that here, and it will resize the available space for you to make sure that what you're building will fit on that screen. You can also have the ability to have this background grid, and you can set on snap to grid. So if I turn on snap to grid and I start to resize this object, you'll notice that it's moving in defined increments. This makes it very easy to ensure all objects are the same size and position them the way that you want them to be positioned. If I look at the visualization itself, this is probably it's got to be the most requested feature in Cognos history, is just the ability to create custom color palettes for these 4 dashboards. And here you can see where I can do that. I can select a pre-built color palette, or I can build a new one. So if I want to call this like Brian's Awesome Colors, okay, I can go ahead and I can choose, have an automatic color guide where it will, as I choose colors, it will suggest ones that it thinks look good, or I can do a custom color palette where I go in and I choose for each next item, you know, what color do I want it to be. I can also choose on a color wheel. Or put in hex codes. So if you have company colors, this was a huge complaint in Cognos 11.0. If, you know, the bars have to be our company color, but we can't make them our company color. I can't tell you, I mean, really dozens of my customers have specifically talked to me about this. Here you have the ability to create kind of whatever palette you want. And importantly, they can be shared. So I can create this palette here, but also an administrator can create a custom palette, and that custom palette can be made available to all users in all Cognos studios. I'm going to leave it how it is for now. Other big things that people really wanted, they totally reorganized this visualization property. So if I come in here, I now have the ability to customize axis labels. So say for the value axis label, it currently says housework average. Maybe I just wanted to say housework. I can, you know, choose whether or not to show the titles, that sort of thing. I also have some different abilities as far as showing grid lines, showing, you know, disabling padding between the bars. So I could go through every visualization and show you guys, hey, here are all the new little features for each visualization, because what options you have here, of course, context dependent on which visualization you're looking at. But there are a ton of different options here that you didn't have before. Now you also have the ability, and I know this is a big one, where if I want to come in here and I want to format this text, I can change the font size. So maybe I want to make it 24-point font, and I want to pick a very silly font like Condiment, and I want to make it red, okay? Again, another thing that was really a barrier, especially to self-service adoption. I don't recommend, I don't think it fits to use visualization best practices to have this particular font and color combo, but if you want to, you now can do it. I mean, that's something that Cognos was sorely lacking for a long time. The same thing is going to go true for your title. So it'll automatically put in a title based on what it is you're looking at, but of course, if you want to center justify the title, and you want to put it in italics and change the size of the title, you now have the ability to do that. So I know it's something people were asking for forever in 11.0, and I'm happy to report that it's available here. Other things that are interesting to see, so it starts to get into some of the out-of-the-box smarts. If I click on I now have this auto group, okay? So if I'm looking at an item with And in fact, let me go ahead and just grab a different visualization to show you this. So let me just put age on the one axis, and let's just say weekly earnings on the other axis. Okay. So now I've got my second visualization here. Again, because I can snap to grid, it's very easy to position these relative to one another compared to how it was in the past. Now, you'll notice I have individual age values here. If I want to automatically bucketize these, come on now. See, everything's context dependent, so I'm not sure why it's not popping up there, but I will just show you here because it is. So auto group is going to give me the option to create an auto grouping of values just on the fly. So as it comes back, you can see it automatically grouped these values into 5 buckets. I'm not sure why it didn't pop up on age, but typically it would. So that's the type of thing that they're trying to make available through the user interface easily through these context-dependent menus and dashboards that in the past would have been hard to see. There are, of course, new visualizations in here if you are interested in any of them. The sunburst is a new visualization. The driver analysis and decision tree. This decision tree was very popular in Watson Analytics, and we'll take a look at it in a second. But that is are now available, as well as bullet charts. This was a personal RFE request of mine that I put into Cognos. Those are now available in here. Now, due to time constraints, I'm going to leave dashboards here in a moment, but I did want to highlight just exactly how useful this kind of how the new AI features and the new Explore feature fit in with dashboards. So one thing I want to do, if I'll go ahead and grab, so let's imagine, I'll drop a column chart in here. And let's say I have this hypothesis, right? And the hypothesis is that, let's remove that. I didn't mean employment status. I meant, where is it? Education. First one, education level, right? So my hypothesis is that education level and average weekly earnings are correlated, right? So here I've built a visualization to show me that. And in previous versions of Cognos or in other solutions, I would look at this and I would say, okay, yeah, the taller bars correspond to higher levels of education, right? I have proved my hypothesis. That is the primary driving relationship between that determines how much money you make, right? An average weekly wage. Well, now I have this Insights button. If I click on the Insights button and I turn Insights on, you will notice a few things. Cognos will highlight outliers. So in this case, our outliers are these two bars, right? It plots an average line on here. Now it's doing that automatically. But highlighted up here at the top, you see education level slightly drives weekly earnings, 16%, okay? So 16% is a pretty low number. And like I said, I would have natively just come in here and looked at it and said, hypothesis proved, right? This is the primary causal relationship. But this is telling me that there are more important relationships in this data set that I haven't uncovered yet. So if I want to see what those are, I click on the visualization, I come up here and click Explore, and choose New Exploration. Now we are going to leave the dashboarding tool and jump into the new exploration interface. And this is where, if you've played with Watson Analytics, this is where a lot of the Watson functionality has been surfaced. So you'll notice I'm looking at the same visualization, but now I have this details area that's telling me things. For example, high school is the most frequently occurring category of education level, represents 28.2% of the total, right? The average values of weekly earnings range from a minimum of $98 when education level is 9th grade to a maximum of $1,083 when education level is doctoral degree. So all of this, Cognos is surfacing automatically. I didn't do any prep work for this demo to type this stuff in. No IT developer needs to do that. Cognos is going to is automatically going to build that stuff for you. From here, if you remember the related visualizations of functionality in Watson Analytics, that's been moved up here where I can see it will process this, and it's doing all this on the fly. These are not pre-built visualizations. It will show me related visualizations. Maybe I'm interested in weekly earnings by age range, for example. I click this plus button, and you'll notice on the sidebar, it's created a new card. That's what these are called. These are cards. And it's put it here, and if I want to take a look at that card, I simply click on that. So what this will do is, as you explore data, it will create new cards, and it will put them in kind of this vertical hierarchy. And what this becomes, I've found as you play with it, is you can go through this and see your reasoning. So if I were to keep going and I had 12 cards here, the first card I looked at would be at the top, the most recent would be at the bottom, and if I were ever curious, like how did I arrive at this conclusion, I could trace my steps back through each card to see how I got there. Now there's a lot of things that I could show in here. For example, you'll notice if I click on this, I have access to that AI assistant again. It picks up where I left off. So the AI assistant will persist between studio experiences. So you can always refer back to, whatever conversation you were having with Cognos, you can always look back on it and see what it was you were talking about. But as far as, what you can do in this studio, I think what is kind of most interesting and what I want to show you has to do with the predictive analysis. So I'm going to come in here and I'm going to choose a driver analysis. And you'll see that it automatically now produced this driver analysis for weekly earnings. And when we were talking about that 18% that we were looking at before, this is where I would go to look at more meaningful relationships. So here I can see a 47% predictive relationship between education level, weekly hours worked, and employment status, right? Here I can see employment status and education level. As I go down through these, I can see various things that predict education level and age range, right? So it's not a single factor analysis, what is the most predictive column, but rather it's going to combine different fields from your data set together in order to show you what are the most impactful combinations of data in determining an individual's weekly earnings in this data set. And then, if I say to myself, if this is cool, I want to use this, this exploration is for exploring data. It's not for presenting data. I can go ahead and pin this. You'll notice it got added to my pinned visualizations over here. There's my weekly earnings decision analysis chart. And if I go back to my dashboard, let's go ahead and shrink this guy up a little. I looked at my pinned visualizations. There's that weekly decisions analysis chart. I can drag it in, resize it to look how I want. And now I've embedded a predictive visualization into my dashboard that interacts with the rest of the dashboard. If I were to choose a particular item on here, you'll see that the predictive dashboard updated as well. So all of the filters that apply to your line charts and bar charts will also apply to these predictive charts when you put them on here. So it's a very easy way to get some nice predictive analysis done and distribute it to people in your organization in an interactive, visually pleasing way that most importantly is easy to do. It's a very low amount of effort compared to doing something in, say, SPSS. Well, forget doing the modeling in SPSS. Just distributing reports based on what you built in a SPSS is significantly more challenging than what we saw here. Now I know that a lot of people, we're at 2:46 here, so I'm going to try to get through the next few things pretty quickly to make sure we leave time for questions. I'm going to go ahead now and just show what I think is one of the best features of this release, which is going to be the ability to upload multi-tab Excel files. Another huge ask that we've gotten. So here I'm grabbing a spreadsheet, I'm dragging it in. There's a new upload experience where I can choose do I want to automatically launch one of the various features while I'm uploading? I'm going to choose data module. Here it's analyzing the spreadsheet just like it would have in 11.0, but this is a spreadsheet with 5 tabs, not just a single tab spreadsheet. And importantly, you also have the ability to append data when you upload now, which was something that you didn't have in the past. Now you can see it's launched data modules and it's automatically joined. It's imported each spreadsheet tab as a table and automatically joined them together. So this was something that in 11.0 it simply couldn't do. I would like to show you all sorts of cool stuff in here, but instead I'll really just hit the high cover functionality gaps with Framework Manager. So one of the main things that people needed out of this that it didn't have is the ability to simply create folders. It's easy, it works exactly the same as it does in Framework Manager. Here I could say customer data, right? I've created a new folder. I can drag and drop tables into the customer data folder, just like I would have in FM. I also have the ability to create filter objects that work the same way they would with Framework Manager filter objects, where it will put a filter in here and I can drag and drop that filter into a visualization and have it apply just like you would expect it to. You can now create tables. This is huge. So I can say I wanted to create a view of the loss events table. I can do that. I can create a joined view. I can union multiple tables together, right? All of this is functionality that people needed in data modules that they didn't have. Now it's all here. This doesn't just close gaps with Framework Manager. It also makes this a much more powerful self-service data blending and modeling tool. So I would encourage you, one, yes, take a look at it as a Framework Manager replacement, but two, do consider its applicability for self-service. It's now got a lot of functionality for self-service data blending that it didn't have in the past. Other key things that I think we should highlight, it now has the ability to do relative time. I don't have enough time to show that in here, but very easily calculate, year to date, month to date, previous year, those sorts of relative time comparisons. It has the ability to do role-based security like you could do in Framework Manager, and it also has a solution called column dependencies. Column dependencies will give you the same functionality as determinants. So if we compare data modules in 11.0 to data modules in 11.1, what are the major differences? It can handle multi-grain facts using column dependencies. It can do that role-based security. You can create views, unions of tables, joins of tables, and you can create these filter objects as well as folders to organize your content. So all of that combined, I think, means that this is a huge improvement for the data module interface. The final thing that I'll take a look at, and again, there's way more I could show that we're not jumping into, but I know that people are really going to want to see what's new in reporting. So the reporting interface has changed a little. It is, I think, dramatically improved. Let me go ahead and add let's just add this American Time Use module. So when I come in here, you'll notice right away that gone are the various types of objects on the side. Now what I have is a breadcrumb-based navigation. So if I click on a report, right, here I have my pages, my prompt pages, queries, classes, and variables. So now this is how you're going to access things. If I click on pages, it'll take me through to my classic page screen. If I add a second page, right, now I can, I can add as pages, page sets, report references, but I can always navigate like you would expect. Let me take a look at page 1 here. If I click on page 1, here I can see page 2. If I want to go take a look at what queries I have, I click on the breadcrumb. Now I'm looking at one query. I want to create a new query. I can access them all that way, right? So this is much, much easier, I think, compared to what we had in the past. Now, it does automatic formatting. So I'm going to grab a text item. I'm going to drag it up to the top of the screen. You'll notice it's got this little text item icon. It's centering it, and it's putting it in basically a header object. I will call this, you know, awesome report. It automatically created a table, put something in, and centered it in the middle of the screen. And now, with the new style functionality, I can create a style. Say I want to call this, you know, the header 2 style. I can determine exactly what I want it to be, right? So, you know, this is, I can set colors, fonts, all sorts of stuff here. And this is totally reusable. So center it, I do all this, right? I say save style, I apply. You notice it applied those changes immediately. And I can make this reusable, not just in this report, but in any report. So if I were to open a new report, my header style 2 would be there. Let's just choose to save that. I'll show you how that looks, right? There's header style 2. If I created a header style previously, I can go back to header style 1 and apply. There's that header style. So as far as managing the formatting of objects, it's just infinitely easier than it used to be with this, this new style management system. The same thing will exist here if I want to input say, a visualization. You'll notice now when I drag it in, it has different content areas, but it will drop it. I'll put this visualization in. Let's make a very simple smooth line chart. For example here, one thing to know, I know we're all going to love this. There is now an 11.1 visualization type and an 11.0 visualization type. They look pretty similar. The difference is 11.1 visualizations are JavaScript visualizations that are going to run client-side in your user's browser. What does this mean? It means, one, they're going to perform much better, and they're more interactive. It will bundle all the data that visualization needs and send it along to the client's browser when the visualization is run or when the report is run. And then if you make changes to the visualization via the interactive viewer, it is not going to requery your database, right? Because it's packaged all the visualization up or all the data up with the visualization at runtime. Here you can see the visualization here. You know, put it onto the page where I wanted it. If I then wanted to come in and let's say I want to insert a list object, you'll see I have options. I can insert it above, I can insert it below. It's important to know that it's still nesting all of these in tables, right? So you're not losing all of that, right? But because it's nested in tables and because the visualization types are now JavaScript, visualizations and charts can now be percentage-based, not just pixel-based. So you see I'm resizing this on the fly. I'm not changing the properties of the visualization itself because the visualization itself, if you look here, is set to 100% width and 100% height, right? And so it's going to fill up 100% of the space I give it. Those are the major changes to reporting. The visualization style change, the fact that this is now locked in place, which again, I love. The context menu, instead of flying up wherever you clicked, is now always in place. If you liked it better before, you can unpin it. I'd be interested to know if anybody will actually do that. But the new breadcrumb style, the new JavaScript visualizations that are, again, processed client-side in the browser, and the new fact that this is pinned up at the top. Those are the major changes to reporting. And I know I just blazed through a ton of stuff. We've only got 4 minutes left. Of course, I can stay late if you're able to. I'm happy to stay on the line and answer questions past our end time. So with that said, I will wrap up here. And Kevin or Joel, I don't know if you want to share some of the questions from the chat.
Yeah, thanks, Ryan. Thanks for the quick overview. You shared a lot of stuff, and I'm sure there was a lot of wows and ahas, just like we saw last week. But on a webinar, of course, we can't hear those. So, but I'm sure there were plenty of those in the background. So thanks for the overview there. Just go back into my screen if I can. I'm not sure what's going on here.
Yeah, I'm scrolling through the chat questions. I see that there's a ton of them. So that's good, right?
Yeah, there's plenty of them. So, Ryan, are you able to make me presenter again, or something is not letting me?
Sure. Yeah, I can.
It'd be great.
Go ahead and see if I can make you a presenter. Just give me 1 second. Okay, Kevin, you should have the make presenter request there.
Let's see here. All right. So before we get into questions, just a couple of recommended next steps that I wanted to share with you guys here. First and foremost, reach out to your PMsquare representative, right? If you're already in the cloud and you're ready to move to Cognos 11.1, we're here to help you kind of plan for that, work with the IBM Cloud Operations team and get you guys upgraded as quickly as possible. If you're on-premise, as Ryan mentioned, 11.1 will be available to you within the coming weeks. So right now is not too late to start planning for that. So happy to help in that process. And then continue to expand your analytics agenda, right? I mean, we talked about the various different ways that the tool has become a lot more easy to use, and that it's really not designed for the elite group of technical users. So continue to expand that, continue to promote self-service analytics, and allow people to really get in there and get their hands on the product, both from a consumption as well as authoring standpoint. And then lastly, monitor and track your success, right? This was a request that we continue to hear from people is, as they went from Cognos 10 to 11, or as they moved from various dot releases of 11, they wanted to make sure that the users they have within the application continue to grow, or at least they don't see any kind of a downturn in user adoption. And that's really one of the primary reasons that we put a lot of focus behind that. And as I mentioned before, the Thrive solution that we've developed is really designed to help you guys do that. Monitor your users, see what they're doing. If they're having issues, how do you proactively get ahead of that? Then as a result of that, we do offer a 45-day free trial of the software where you can get your hands on it and see if it's something that adds a lot of value. Like I said before, we received a lot of really good feedback last week at the university, and a lot of people are jumping on board in the trial. So I encourage all of you guys to send us a note, get set up with your free trial of Thrive, just to help in that process. With that said, we've got a couple minutes left here, Ryan, so let me pop up a couple of questions for you. First question, when will they release the binary for us to test?
So yeah, I kind of addressed that a little bit, right? So we're not sure, right? Q4, I'm hopeful sometime in November, but I don't know for certain. And when we know more and are able to share more about the release date, we will.
Okay. Next question I've got here is version 10.2 no longer supported? So I can actually answer that. Correct. So 10.2 was actually sunsetted in April of this year. So technically, not a supported platform. That doesn't mean you don't get support on the platform itself, on the version itself, but obviously there's no additional enhancements that'll be introduced or no additional fix packs that'll be introduced on 10.2. And that's part of the reason that we do encourage you to definitely move to Cognos 11. And obviously, if you're going there, move to the latest version, 10.1. Next question I've got here, is there a defined upgrade path from 10.0.12 to 11.0.12 to 11.1? Are there any lessons learned that you can share?
Yeah, sure. So, with the on-prem release not being out yet, we haven't really had the ability to really deeply test it. So what I can share with you is what I know from my conversations with IBM, which is basically that, the over-the-top upgrade that has been in place for moving between one 11.0 release and another is still an option. As far as what changed this is what I'll say. As far as what changed under the hood, no major changes. Report service, query service, all of that stuff is still as it was. So there's nothing that should necessitate, if you've already moved from 10 to 11, moving from 11.0 to 11.1, I don't anticipate you having any problems really with any of your existing reports. So I think as far as whether you want to do an over-the-top or spin up new servers, I don't really have a firm recommendation on that yet, but I think this is going to be a pretty straightforward and low impact upgrade.
Excellent. So I know we're a couple minutes past the hour, but we have a lot of questions, so I'll give you a couple more, Ryan, here. I know we have a lot of people still staying on. Next question is, does 11.1 require upgrade hardware specs? It looks a lot of CPU computing in your demo. Yes.
So the answer to that question is yes. So the minimum, here's what I would say. You're going to need more memory. The minimum recommendation for the JVM that you set in Cognos configuration is going up to 8 gigs, right? So you're going to want to be able to accommodate that. That's going to do two things. One, yes, the processing that you saw in the demo is going to require more horsepower. And two, there's a new processing engine for Excel files and data sets that processes them significantly faster. And this is something I want to make sure I can't remember if I mentioned it during that the demo, but I want to make sure people understand is Cognos now uses Spark SQL to process Excel files and data sets, and it can process approximately 10 million rows before performance in dashboards should go above 4 seconds response time. So I would encourage you, if you do have very large data sets, to consider very, very large data, right, in your underlying databases. If the performance is poor, to consider whether or not building a data set object within Cognos is an option. So yes, you are going to need more memory. I haven't heard for sure that IBM thinks you'll need more CPU, although I wouldn't be shocked if that turns out to be the case, but for sure more memory for the AI features and for the new data set processing engine.
Perfect. Thanks for that. One related question, has query performance been improved in Cognos 11.1?
Yes, yeah. So I wouldn't, honestly, I think query performance continues to slowly get a little better, but there are a number of features in 11.1 that will help you with your query performance. So the first one I mentioned is that the data set, the Spark SQL data set processing engine is very fast. If you're having slow queries, I would investigate that. And if you're not sure what I'm talking about, feel free to reach out to us. This is, in my mind, this is the hidden gem of Cognos. Hardly anybody knows about it. I think it's incredibly useful, and I'm happy to sit down with anyone who has questions and show them it. That's your first option. The other two options are going to be, I didn't show it, but in data modules, you now have the ability to set a cache on a table-by-table basis. So when you're modeling in data modules, you click on a table and you can set the cache functionality for that table. So if you have something that's performing poorly with real-time query execution and does not need near real-time data, you can set the cache for that. And you can also set visualization cache for visualizations in both reporting and dashboards. So 3 options there. That's beyond just any general improvements in the query processing engine. I'm not aware of any general improvements. I would expect there probably are some, but I think if you're having query performance problems, there are a lot of new options for you to explore to improve that.
Excellent, thanks for that. So I'll give you one more question. It seems like you're still keeping everyone's attention, and we've got well over 100 people in attendance. So I'll give you. I
know, honestly, Kevin, I'm happy to stay on here as long as there's an audience. So, we can go as long as you want.
All right. Well, I'll give you 1 or 2 more then. Next question is, are studios like Analysis Studio and Query Studio still available in this version?
Yes. Yep. Those are not going away. They're deployed and managed exactly the same way as they would have been in 11.0.
Okay, excellent. I think you already kind of alluded to this earlier, but the question is, are data modules going to completely replace Framework Manager? Yeah,
so replace is a strong word. Framework Manager is not going anywhere, but what I would say is that Framework Manager is not going to receive any future development, right? IBM is going to make sure that it works and continues to work with Cognos for the foreseeable future. I wouldn't be surprised if I still do some work in Framework Manager in 15 or 20 years. But all new development is going into data modules. So if you are someone who looked at data modules and was not convinced in 11.0, I would take another look in 11.1 and seriously consider whether or not you should transition to using them as your primary modeling interface. Everything new is going to go into them, right? So as time progresses, Framework Manager is going to stay the same. Data modules is going to get all new features. So yeah, with that said, it's not replacing it. We're not going to take Framework Manager away, but I would strongly consider you to look at whether or not data modules are an option for you, even if you're kind of a dyed-in-the-wool hardcore FM modeler.
All right. And I have another question here that's an interesting one, so I'll go ahead and give you this last one then. Can a Framework Manager package be converted to a data module model?
That is a good question. Not really. So, how would you do something? So there are some ways, if you really needed to do that we could take a look at kind of simulating that experience, but there is no convert button. That would actually be very useful. Let me think about if we could. So PMsquare, we actually have a development team. I know Kevin mentioned our Thrive product earlier. We actually have a development team that builds Cognos add-ons, and that's a good idea. And I might be willing to look at what it would take to build something that was able to do that. So whoever asked that question, maybe we can talk after the webinar and see if we can put something together. But there's no easy button for it. No, you basically right now you'd have to remodel it.
Excellent. Well, there are a lot more questions